The rut has been pretty exciting around here. The bucks have been chasing does, checking scrapes, and sorting out their dominance. But if you're like me, even though you've seen a lot of bucks running around chasing does, you have not seen the one that you're after. So if you've failed to fill your tag during the pre-rut and the peak rut part of the season, you may start feeling a little down because we're headed into a kind of dreaded part of the season, and that's the lockdown phase. This can make what's supposed to be a great time to be out there hunting into a pretty boring sit with no action whatsoever, at least no action for you. But don't give up on this time of the year just yet, because in this video we're going to go over 3 tips to hunting the lockdown phase of the rut. But before we get into these tips, do me a favor, and if this is your first time on my channel, hit that subscribe button and make sure you click that bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload a video. And the first tip to being successful during this frustrating time of the year is you have to understand exactly what's going on during the lockdown. The lockdown phase of the rut is the period when a lot of the breeding is happening, but the buck activity just seems to stop. That's where the term lockdown phase comes from. It's those bucks are locked in with a specific doe. So they're spending a day or two bird dogging a doe until they finally get their shot. But they're not laying down in bed for days and days though. They are still moving around a lot. They're just in different portions of their home range looking for receptive does. So the reason you're not seeing that buck you've had consistently on camera, leading up to this point is because he's in a different portion of his home range looking for that next receptive doe. He's moved on from last week's lady and is on to somebody else. Now, you're not seeing him on camera, but I guarantee you somebody else in your neighborhood is. So don't give up in the middle of November just because that buck you've been getting on camera hasn't shown up yet, or because you think he was probably shot somewhere else. Chances are he wasn't, because you didn't shoot him, so chances are your neighbor's not going to shoot him. And this time of the year, bucks are running all over the place. So you might get a different buck show up on your property that you haven't seen up to this point. So don't worry about where that buck might be. You have to be out there during this time because you never know what buck is going to come cruising by. And the second tip to being successful during the lockdown phase is you have to concentrate on those thick bedding areas known to hold a lot of does. This strategy is simple. During the morning hunts, I key in on those thick bedding areas, and I like to think that I'm actually hunting for does because wherever those does go, those bucks will follow. Hunt the downwind side of the bedding areas and try to access it from the opposite side of where you think the deer are going to be. So in the mornings, before the sun comes up, they're likely off feeding somewhere. So let's say you've got a bedding area on the east side of your property and then a food plot just to the west of it. It doesn't make sense to try to hunt it with an east wind because you've got to approach it through that food plot just to get there with the wind in your face, and your scent is going to be blowing where the deer are most likely going to be coming from, so you'll just spook them off. Instead, hunt that situation with a west wind, so then you can approach from this direction while the deer are off in the food plot on the other side. Another option would be if you had a north or south wind. It all really depends on your access, but if you've got a north wind and you've got bedding here and food plot here, and you approach from this direction, you can hunt that transition in between and the deer will never know you're there. For an evening hunt, you just flip that. You place the food source between you and the bedding thicket, or put yourself in between the two in a pinch point. The point is you need to know where the does are coming from and going to in order to ambush the bucks that are trailing them or to cut them off on the way. And the third tip for hunting the lockdown phase of the rut is to try and plan for an all-day sit. All-day sits can be tough. Even the most comfortable tree stands can turn into medieval torture devices after 3 or 4 hours or so. But if you can tough it out, this is when it will most likely pay off. Now, deer movement is still at its highest right after sunrise and before sunset, but there have been multiple GPS collar studies that have shown that bucks' movements during the midday are up to 4 times higher during this part of the season. So bring your lunch with you, discreetly stretch a little bit, make sure you stay warm and dry, and bring something to distract you when that urge to get down is overwhelming you. Just don't get too distracted that you miss something sneaking on past you. So those 3 tips to beating the lockdown phase of the rut. If you've got any more tips or strategies that have worked for you, leave those down in the comments below. Hit that like button if you like this video, share it if you found it helpful, and make sure that you are subscribed so you can stay informed.